And we are now live.
This is Senate Appropriations, and we're taking further testimony on the FY 2023 budget. And with us this afternoon is Treasurer Beth Pierce to present the budget request for the Treasurer's Office. You can introduce the staff that you have with you, Beth, and we hope you'll understand why we're meeting and eating, because we just really got off the floor. So we'll let you introduce your staff and then do your budget presentation.
Sure. Yes, well, let me introduce our staff. They're a great staff. Will Krewald, you can wave if you want, is our CFO, Chief Financial Officer. John Booth is our Chief Treasury Operations Director, and had a lot to do with getting the budget done. Owen Doherty is our executive assistant in the office. He replaces Ashlyn in her previous job, and Ashlyn is now our policy director and financial literacy as well, taking on the duties that some of you know. Dylan Giambattista left, so she's taken on those functions as well as kept some policy. With us also is my deputy, Michael Clausen, and couldn't get anything done without him. And I believe I've covered everyone on the staff. And I've seen a nod up and down, so I guess that's the case. So I want to say thank you for the opportunity to talk about our budget. And there are a number of pieces to what we do in the Treasurer's Office, and parts of the budget that aren't specific to the Treasurer's Office, things along the line of the pension and OPEB, ADEX, and the dollars appropriated there, and we'd be happy to answer those questions as well. But I am going to start, unless I hear differently, with the our base budget, which is our administrative budget, our unclaimed property budget, our retirement budget, and the debt service. And as I talk about our administrative budget, which is funded primarily from the general fund, I took a look back, and since 2009 up to last year, our budgets were lower than what the budget we had in 2009, even though we were absorbing new tasks such as the ABLE program, Achieving a Better Life Experience program for individuals with disabilities, new financial literacy requirements, some changes in terms of our investment portfolio, COVID. This year, we're going to exceed that a bit. But if you take a look at if we had received basic 2.5% increases over the period since 2009, our budget now would be below that. So we've been lean. I always say lean but not mean, and we've tried very hard to keep this down. This year we are going to be asking for some increases, particularly in staff. We've asked for 4 additional positions. 2 of them are in the Treasury Operations area. One is a principal assistant, and the other is a financial specialist too. The principal assistant is one of the 3 positions by statute that the Treasurer's Office, as well as other constitutional offices, have in their office. We've used that position to support the CIO, the Chief Investment Officer, over the last several years, and that's worked. But as you know, VPIC is going to be doing their own separate budget. They're a new separate entity. And while the CIO was involved in VPIC activities, they're also doing a number of activities, investment activities for our trust investment account, and managing the work we have with Prudential, with our 2 DC accounts, defined contribution accounts, and 4 supplemental accounts, deferred compensation, 403B program for the teachers and the like, and working on looking at the investment lineup for those programs, as well as following return. So we are going to need someone to take over those functions. And so we are looking to bring the principal assistant, which is a statutory position, back to the Treasurer's Office. The governor's budget includes that position, the principal staff assistant, but they provided no budget for it by putting in a vacancy savings equivalent to reducing this and some of the other budgeted items in payroll. So while we have the position entitled, we do not have the budget for it in the governor's budget request. The financial specialist two would be an additional position that we're looking for in the treasurer's office. We've been working around the clock as everybody else has, and we get that. And you've heard this along the way, but I did want to point out that I did a little research, and back in 2003, Treasury operations staff had 11 positions. Today, there are 8 positions. And in retirement, which we would be asking for staff positions as well, in 2003, they had 12 positions plus some seasonal, quote, permanent seasonal positions, equivalent to about 13 staff. They were serving 32,000 active vested and retired members. Today, we have 14 positions, but 58,000 clients. So if you compare that ratio, the ratio back in 2003, customers to staff was 2,400. Now it's 4,100, almost, you know, it's just incredible how much the additional work these folks have had. So I'm making a plea in terms of our staff and our needs there. As I said, we're working with less staff than we had back in 2003, a bare bones budget, and taking on a lot of new activities. As departments are having issues with their own retention of employees, they're having a lot of turnover, retirement issues. We have new people in new places, and a lot of those folks do not have the institutional knowledge that they're very good people. There's no ifs and buts about it, but a lot of that institutional knowledge went out the door. And as a consequence, there are things that are coming to us that need more work, reconciliations, working with the business officers in the various departments. And it's going to take a while to get that back into where it should be pre-COVID, or what probably is a new normal in a post-COVID. But we've got a lot of demands on those staff. And again, that's one of the biggest issues in terms of our budget. We do have some changes in our budget in addition to that, related to how our bond counsel is suggested moving forward and handling our bond expenses. These are already accounted for. It's just a matter of where they are placed in the budget. It's not going to have any overall impact on the budget, but just where they are located within the overall treasurer's budget.
I want to go back on the position.
Sure.
The administration basically gave you a position but said pay for it with vacancy savings.
Yeah, they basically gave us the position, but then took out the dollars through vacancy savings.
And then you've requested 2 retirement program technician positions. Are those, are you on here, the requested positions are ones that you asked the governor's office to put in and did not get?
I'm going to ask.
So Madam Chair, are you looking at the 1-page slide that talks about the differences between the governors? I can't see on the camera. It's very small.
It says request positions.
Yeah, so
I'm assuming that you're basically saying we asked of the governor, we didn't get them, now we're asking them of the legislature.
Yeah, so what we asked for and the governors recommended that they granted us was, we have a limited service financial manager 1 position. And so the funding is there. We asked for that to be moved to a classified permanent position. It doesn't have any change in funding, but they didn't grant us that. We asked for a temporary financial specialist, which they did give us the funds for. It's about $30,000. And we asked for the principal assistant position to be fulfilled, and that the position exists, but they included vacancy savings, so we have no funding for it. And then we asked also for a permanent classified financial specialist too, and we did not get granted that. The retirement program technicians are also not in the governor's recommended budget, so that's why that's detailed on that slide as well.
So what did you get?
Not enough. It's simple as that. We did get, what can I say? We do have the positions that we've had in the past, with the exception of the principal assistant, which again, while we had the position, it was associated with investments, including VPIC, and obviously they're going to we're going to need that back while they are filling their position. we are looking for that additional position, as we said, in finance, in our treasury operations, as well as those 2 additional positions. You know, we're working, as I said, we have right now we have 14 staff in retirement, and that means for every member, retiree vested member, they're serving 1 for each 4,100 members of the systems or customers that we're serving. As I said, back in 2003, that was 1 for every 2,400. You know, there's a point at which you cannot increase the workload. There's a point at which you've maxed out, and I don't see how we can do the current functions that we have, in addition to the changes and new functions that are going to be required based on the legislation that is currently going through the pension task force. So we're really in a pinch here. We do not have staff to manage existing workloads, and we know more is coming.
I'm just wondering about the ratio that you're using. Once somebody retires, how much work does it take to continue just paying their benefit?
Well, we still have to manage those individuals in terms of getting them on the payroll. We manage that payroll. We need to manage their health care benefits. We need to manage any cost of living changes that occur.
I understand, but doesn't that amount of labor stay the same once you've found someone eligible and determined their benefit? Those activities, aren't they systems changes, whether you had 100 or whether you had 1,000? I'm just trying to understand what
people have different selections, what they can do in retirement and their health care, and we go through those enrollment periods. If you know, this past year, we interacted with every single teacher retiree on changing their retirement plan and their healthcare plan. And in the process, by the way, saved them 30 to 38%, depending on the plan they were in premiums, and saving money for the state as well. But that took an awful lot of work. We were working day in, day out with members of each portion of the healthcare system, whether they were over 65, under 65, and what plan they were in the over 65 population. And that was a mountain of work. We continue to have other projects related to this as we move forward. And we're taking a look at cost of living increases, for instance, that are going to happen with teachers and the process for that. We see this as a workload that, as I said, we're maxed out. When you take a look at the reporting systems that are necessary too for the actuaries and the auditors, we've had very good work in our office. We have not had audit findings. If you compile a bunch of audit findings, you can put the state's financial statements at risk. We have not had an audit finding to my memory in years. We don't want to be in a position where we fail in terms of our current administration and administering the new pension task force requirements that we're going to have. We're going to have issues around new requirements, new testing by the actuaries, and very much more complex systems than we've ever had. And we want to get it right. And we want to get it right for the entire, not just for the retiree, but for the state and its financial welfare as well.
With the 14 retirees.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
With the 14 retirees, they must have been at the top of the schedule. The new hires must be at much lower levels. So where's the money in between the new hires and the retirees? Where's that money going?
Sorry, I'm not understanding the question.
I don't think she was talking about 14 people retiring. I think she was talking about 14 working in the retirement section of work. Right. I think. Yes. Could you clarify that, please?
That is correct. That is correct. Well, we have had some retirement of staff over the years. We've been very fortunate in bringing in some very good people. And just in case your committee is not aware of it, we've now replaced our retirement director. Some of you know her, Erica Wolfane has left, and Tim Duggan, who was our legal counsel through the AG's office, is now the new retirement director. So we're very sorry to have lost Erica, but we're very pleased to have Tim in that position.
Getting back to Senator Starr's question, the 14 employees were in the retirement division.
Yes.
And that's the number of positions that you have now, or those are the number of positions you had a few years ago, and you're down and need more. But you were talking about the ratio to staff to retirees was just about double.
Yeah. So in 2003, we had 13 staff. We had 12 classified permanent positions, and then 2 what I would call seasonal permanent people that they're on a regular basis every year, 2 part-time people, so 13. This year we have 14. But if you take the number of active vested and retired members in 2003, the ratio was 2,100 to 1. And if you take the ratio now, the ratio is 4,100 to 1.
So your staffing has stayed same, but the number of retirees per employee has doubled.
Yeah, and has the complexity of our systems, as you know, we create new carve-outs and the like. So working with folks.
Senator Starr is still giving me a puzzled look, so I'm going to have him ask the question again.
Well, the part I'm having a little question with, and I don't even know, Beth, if you can answer it, but we know we went from 120,000 students down to 75,000 students, but yet the number of people that you're having to look after in the education field is gone up instead of down, so we have a lot more.
Oh, but it's state employees too. It's not just teachers, it's state employees.
Well, both, but
yeah.
still, there should be a lot less teachers, you'd think, but maybe there.
Depends on how many have retired and how many are replacing them, I guess.
What we're finding, frankly, is that there is a lot of teacher retirements, more rapid than in the past. Part of it was COVID, but it was in that trend starting around 2010 on. And there was also a lot of turnover in teacher positions. So people that came on and left, and basically between turnover and retirements, when we talk about the gains and losses in the system, that contributed over $400 million to the unfunded liability. Frankly, to me, there are workforce issues that need to be addressed. We're not the workforce experts. We're not the educational experts, but we do have responsibility for the individuals who are retiring, who are contemplating retiring, or going through the system and over a period of time that may leave the system, may stay, but nonetheless are our responsibility while they're in it.
You have something here called TIBS refunding in the VA, not included. Is that because we paid off the TIB bond? So what are you referring to here?
There are two bond pieces. One is the TIBS, which is the that it was addressed in the budget adjustment, where they would redeem the bonds and then use the dollars in PAYGO in the transportation budget. And frankly, with the changes in gas prices right now, the PAYGO dollars should be unfortunately, for a lot of other reasons, and I mean it's appalling. But we're in pretty good shape in terms of those PAYGO dollars and being able to use those on a cash basis rather than borrowing that money. So we're confident that was a good transaction. The other piece of this is a request from us, and there is something in the budget adjustment that reserves $25 million for potential capital improvements or borrowing improvements. And what we are requesting is that 20 million of that be used to redeem bonds that are callable in August of 22, and use those dollars to help seed a PAYGO fund, a fund that has cash dollars for capital projects instead of borrowing. we did an analysis with our financial advisor, and for roughly every $1 million that we bond for, there's approximately $400,000 of interest expense. And we would rather use cash dollars to pay for things where we can rather than borrow. And if those cash dollars can be invested during time, the way I look at it is I would rather earn interest than pay interest. And so our hope is that over time, by using such a fund, we can reduce the reliance on debt and find a more cost-effective way to provide for our capital needs.
All right, so but that's a different issue. So the TIB bond in the BAA, and the House has passed it, we are paying off those bonds. That frees up $2.5 million that they are building into their FY 2023 budget because they don't have a debt service. My question, so then what you're talking about as well is you are stating in the budget adjustment, we set aside to improve the state's debt position, 25 million. That's different than the capital bill proposal to do more pay-go. But it does free up, obviously, money. So, but we are not committing anything yet at this point to fund or to move that those revenues to that proposed purpose by the governor. So we, at this point, simply reserve the 25 million that was equated to the 20 million to pay off the bond, general obligation bond, and the 5 million to do the property management fund and get that off the CAFR. That's parked in reserve.
Yes.
If we paid off the bond, we know that there will be freed up money, just like with the TIB bond, that can then be used either in any way that we might ultimately choose. You're recommending that those dollars that no longer have to be used for debt service go into, you're concurring with the governor's recommendation to create that capital fund to do more pay-go on capital projects and reduce the bonding level.
Yeah, we're concurring with the concept. Some of the particulars, we agree fundamentally with what's happening there. In fact, this was a proposal that our office presented in 2011 to the institutions committees. And at the time said, this is a great idea, but we need to do it in a time where we have enough resources to seed this fund. You folks have called this a transformational year in many ways.
No, I think the governor has, that's his term.
Well, I think that I apologize with that, but I do think that we this is an opportunity to in fact fund a program like this. We can talk about the specifics of the number of dollars and work that through. This is a plan that's worked in municipalities primarily, some in New Hampshire, some in Connecticut that I'm familiar with. I actually use this methodology in a town that I worked for, AAA rated town in Connecticut, and it was very, very successful. And again, the ability to put money aside to pay for future capital projects and earn interest on it in the meantime. Last year, now this year, I mean, you just take a look at the markets right now and what's going on with the crisis that we're in. But last year, our trust investment account earned 14.9% interest. And I would have rather have put those dollars in there, earned some interest, and on the other side, than paying interest out the door. We think that this creates an opportunity for the future. We can discuss and work through different amounts of dollars, but I think the concept and the creation of such a fund, this is an opportune time to do something that will serve Vermonters for many, many more years in their capital needs.
All right, so you want, I guess what you want here is, I'm just looking at your last bullet. Some of this is kind of a statement of, we want reimbursement of the interdepartmental transfer between BPIC and Office of State Treasurer to cover admin fees. That's not in the budget, so I don't know how much money you're talking about.
So it might be helpful, Madam Chair. This slide that you're looking at is an addendum to our presentation. This was produced because our presentation matches what's in the governor's recommend, and we wanted to be able to illustrate clearly where we differed with the administration in our requests. The amount of money that we're talking about for the teachers in the state for this IDT is about $29,500, but it is already included in the budget. It's included as being provided directly from the retirement special funds. What we're asking for here is for the money to flow through VPIC so that it's understood what the true costs are for VPIC rather than having it buried in our budget effectively.
All right, so I'll rely on joint fiscal and Stephanie to address that. I mean, or keep that in mind.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yes, that's what we're trying to figure out here is what is this? Why? What does this really mean? What are you requesting of us? And the reason why. So thank you on that front. So you're happy that we paid off the TIB bonds, the BAA, and you're probably not, you would have preferred doing what the Senate did, but we had to compromise with the House because the question is not all debt is bad, and not all debt is good, and have time to really think about internal service deficits versus bond reduction and so forth. So that's kind of a parked issue at this point, and we'll have to revisit it. So thank you on that front. So in terms of your budget, it's pretty much you would like the staff that you've requested here. Just like every other department, you've got your increases because of salary and benefits and feature base and so forth. Anything else that is that you'd like to really point out in terms of the budget for the treasurer's office?
I don't know if Will could talk a little bit about debt for just a minute, but before you do that, I'd like to point out, yes, a lot of folks are saying we need new staff. I think I don't know how many departments can say through 2022 that they had a lower budget than they did in 2009. So we've been spendthrifts, to be very frank, and at this point in time, we can't absorb anymore. So I just wanted to make that distinction. This is not a situation where we come in year after year and say we need more. We've been doing the lean budget for a great length of time. If it's okay, I'd like Will to just talk a little bit about the debt service budget and the changes we made there. You're on mute. Will, you're on mute.
I was navigating it so well, Beth. I'm on the 5th page of the full presentation that we submitted, and it shows B1000, which is our debt service section for folks that want to follow along. If you see over on the right side, you'll see that we in our budget in the governor's recommend requested debt service for TIBS, but based on the slide that we just shared in our discussion, that's going away. The other item that you'll notice that's a little bit different is both the change in debt service and the bond issuance costs. So the change in debt service was budgeted, assuming we did about $100 million issue in May of fiscal 22. So that's how we came up with the money that's in this change in debt service number. Embedded in that number that you can't see is also somewhere about $325,000 of reduced debt service as a result of calling the general obligation bonds, which were proposed in the governor's recommend. So if we don't call those general obligation bonds, that number would have to increase slightly.
Yeah, we know that. All right, thank you.
And then the second thing that's a little bit different is we have an explicit line item here for bond issuance costs. So the current practice right now is that there are haircuts taken from projects as part of the capital bill. And when working with our bond counsel and our financial advisor, it'd be a lot easier for us to do some of the accounting and some of the tracking if we could pay those explicitly. So we've asked for it as a specific appropriation here, as opposed to being embedded in the projects.
Okay, so it's no new spending, it's simply pulling that money out and making it obvious in terms of the issuance costs.
Yeah, so it's an explicit appropriation, so we wouldn't have to build what we call a haircut percentage into the project costs. There's some little nuances with the timing as far as
The general fund, Stephanie?
It is from the general fund line here.
I know, but if this cost had been reflected in the project cost historically, that would have been paid through
The lower.
what?
Yeah.
It would have been paid through the capital bill and part of the debt service. So we're shifting. Are we actually putting costs?
Pressure on the general
We're
fund.
putting pressure on the general fund by doing this because we're taking costs that would have otherwise been included as
Or
a cost.
reduced as part of the.
Yeah.
so if you look right here on this page, you'll see that the general fund bears the majority of the burden for debt service. There's only about $500,000 of debt service that lives in the transportation fund. So I agree with you. It adds some cost pressure from a timing perspective because you'd be paying those bond issuance costs through debt service, but it still would be in the general fund.
Eventually, when the full project cost was realized.
Yes.
Essentially, is what you're saying. The haircut's a timing thing, not a change in where the debt service is paid.
I know we've always paid the debt service out of the general fund. We're just finding so many different ways that people are moving stuff onto the general fund that got financed through other mechanisms. And I just am trying to make certain that I understand the impact here.
Yeah, that is a problem.
It is a big
It's
problem.
we're seeing throughout state government. Now that we've got money and then don't let me get going on that. But just for this particular budget, it's a consistent thing where we're moving
Yeah.
money to the general.
So I mean, we're just, getting things. Well, let's give our proposal, increase to the towns. Well, if that's 800 and some odd $1,000 ding on the general fund cash register. So we're finding that because we haven't done fee increases that have supported functions of state government, that those costs as a result of that foregone revenue are having to be picked up by the general fund. So we're finding all kinds of ways that things have been dealt with by making something advantageous in one place, but adding more and more pressure to the general fund. And so that's why I'm asking for the clarity and understanding that this is not adding 300 or whatever it is. I gotta put my city.
It's $675,000 is the average issuance costs for an issue that size.
Madam Chair, could we check with just Will, maybe a way to pay for this out of issuance costs? There's an alternative there that you might be able to suggest?
Yeah, we could work, and I don't know if it would be through appropriations or if it'd be through corrections and institutions of having explicit budgetary authority in the issuance and then using those issuance proceeds to pay the issuance costs so that it would still, you wouldn't have the timing exposure, but we would still have that explicit authority so we wouldn't have to haircut the projects. Maybe that reduces the near term general fund pressure. So what I'm saying there is instead of having it embedded in the projects as some percentage of their costs and it would still be paid by the general fund, we would use we would get specific budgetary authority to pay bond issuance costs, and then we would just have that fold into debt service.
We'll talk about it. All right, thank you.
Yep.
So, Madam Chair,
like sitting on a cactus and figuring out which thorn's digging you the most.
So, Madam Chair, I think that concludes what we have, and certainly would take any more questions. Before we do that, I wanted to say thank you to this committee in terms of the OPEB budgets, particularly the teacher budget. I listened very carefully last year to the last items on the consent. I'm trying to remember the word, but the budget conference committee budget, and you folks had a great idea, which has been adopted this year. And I want to say thank you, because getting to the point that we can now pre-fund those benefits is going to save the state millions and millions of dollars over time. Our estimate that pre-funding will reduce the liabilities by about $1.7 billion. So I want to say thank you, because I don't think it would have happened without this committee. And so I just wanted to extend my sincere thanks.
It wouldn't happen without you. I don't know about the whole.
Yeah, You're right, you've all been right there behind me.
Pushing
Yeah, right,
it,
yeah.
snapping the whip.
Well, if the pension bill is gonna be in here. We have the special committee and, they needed help. But Senator White said, you know, we need to have this looked at from a fiscal perspective, because, how this could work in the budget. And so, it provided me, and at that point, the task force had not been looking at the underfunding of the retiree healthcare benefits, which for state employees, actually, the underfunding was greater than the pensions. And I think that was kind of a shock, and there was some, well, let's not deal with that now when I raised it. And I said, now's the time to deal with it. And we have to look at the security of those healthcare benefits as just as much a part of that economic security for retirees. So it was in December that we actually put out the proposal that would deal with both components. And so if we can get this pension bill passed, and in total, it's close to $2 billion of underfunding that we have dealt with. It will be a very significant step forward, and having set up the structure to start pre-funding a benefit that has been out there but has never really been just sort of kicked down the road. So the House will still have to act, but anyway, the pension bill is here, and I'm sure my committee will support it.
Wow.
Under penalty of death. And obviously a lot of work was done by Joint Fiscal with Chris Roop and Stephanie helping figure out how money can be moved around. So that's going to be our next one of our bills that we'll have to get out as well. So anything else other than we have a lot of work to do here? Any other comments or whatever? Anyway, we're happy. We're happy we put the money in reserve as a result of last year's committee conference in the Ed Fund Reserve to give us that capacity to really address pre-funding of healthcare benefits for teachers when they retire. So it did set us up well. And then the 150 that was in reserve also were major pieces. So we hope to end up this year, and we hope to end up this session in a much better place than we started with it. So other questions for the treasurer or her staff? Okay, well, thank you very much, Beth, and we will obviously be in touch, and hopefully we can get the pension bill finalized and out by the end of next week.
Thank you very much for your time, and be safe this weekend. Some storms are coming through.
Yeah.
Thank you, Beth.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Senator Sears doesn't even have to commute on Saturday.
No?
So
Yeah,
shall we move to
right.
the legislative vote? And because the more we can get done before Dick leaves at 2.
Last Friday, you had
I
it
said,
many.
no, did you want to do,
Didn't take you
because
long
there's a
at
huge
all,
group of them
but-
coming in with the big schedule, do you want to do the bills?
No, I really would like it. Can Janet come in?
I'll send, I'll just run down and ask her too, I'll text her.
Because I think that that's the Capitol Police request, and I really would like to have Senator Sears.
Yeah, I've met with them.
You're all, I know we're all set.
Yeah.
But otherwise, what bills are we gonna do?
We were talking about S91 and S258. I'll give you a copy of each, so you can.
91 is the Senate House, 258 is the ag bill that you probably, that came in yesterday probably. So I figured Senator Starr, it extends the task force, so it has a very minimal.
Yeah,
cost.
All right,
the only thing is the payout for the task force we're using, I believe.
That's either it's $2,000 to $7,000, depending on if there's actual expenses, if people fully meet in person.
And
Um,
all right, so we've.
And it's a legislative cost, there's no need to appropriate money.
legislative.
And for not more than 10 meetings,
Yeah.
if they,
So 4 are already legislators and 4 are non-legislators, and probably most of them don't seek a per diem, it's more the expenses. And the 7's probably way too high, probably somewhere in the $2,000 to $4,000 range on the legislative budget. And then you're also expanding the use of the clean water, the uses that, they're not appropriations, it's an extension of the uses of the clean water money for, in the soil, right?
okay, and,
Agronomic.
so that is, you're expanding on the approvable use for the,
That's a good, I'm gonna bring my copy of the bill over.
Here, I have it for you.
I had one comment,
I think it's on page 9, that you want to see.
so it's, in order to implement, you're saying you gotta have education, training, and instruction, because, that's on page 9. The agronomic practice assistance program is.
Oh, that,
Is that what you're referring to, Stephanie?
Yes.
that is, something that the agency does already, I thought.
Well, you're adding it, making it clear that they can use that money
Education, training,
for
instruction.
education, training, and instruction.
That's my understanding, that's the reason I came here, that the per diem.
But
I think probably they're doing it, it's making it explicit that those are permissible activities to be funded.
yeah, and they didn't ask for any money.
No, they're just asking for a specific authority to be using the money for those, and it seems like,
Yes,
if you're gonna, prior to implementation, you've got to have the training instruction. You've gotta,
yeah,
you've gotta do that advanced work before you can implement. So that's just adding, and that's what the agency asked for.
Yeah.
Okay, and then,
that
additional
basically,
soil-based practices.
that's basically an offshoot for the ecosystem services and.
So the thing is, the extension of the task force to revitalize Vermont area, revitalize, I think we ought to say, to keep it alive.
Well, that's what it's gonna try to do.
Well,
Well, so the task force, in other words, you want to extend until February of 2023.
Yeah, so we can get a report in and if there is legislation needed to put together, we've had time to do that.
So we have a bill here, it's fairly minor, and it's making it clear how money can be spent, make it clear that they can do the training, education, and instruction as part of that implementation for farm ag practices. And then the other is extension of the task force, which sounds like it's very modest in levels of fact. But it is legislators, right? So 4 legislators would get a per diem.
I said, I will move the bill, or move it's not an amendment, it's the bill.
Bill favorably.
I move the bill favorably with a little addendum that Senator Starr's, his, redeeming money being cut by a certain amount.
A rateable reduction.
A rateable reduction to help cover general fund
Okay.
increases.
So
I would friendly amendment, establish a categorical grant program to give Bobby back that.
so we have a motion to move the bill favorably by Senator Sears. Could I have a second? Okay, Al, Senator Nitka, our clerk, that's a Tonsion.
Senator Ballin. Senator Baruch, yes. Senator Nitter,
Yes.
Senator Sears,
Yes.
Senator Starr,
Yes.
Senator Westman, Senator Kitchen.
Yes. So it's 502.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that was fast.
Okay,
That was-
so I'll do the amendment on the floor.
And the reporter will be Senator Starr. Okay.
Yeah. Did you have an estimated cost on the meetings, Steph?
No.
The cost of the legislative budget, the range is $2,000 to $7,000. The 7 is probably very high because you're not probably gonna have your all 10 meetings fully in person. And so it's probably more in the $4,000.
So it doesn't take even an appropriation, it's just a cost that will be absorbed in it.
Absorbed into the legislative budget.
Chair, at 2 o'clock, I have to step out for about 10 minutes. If Senator Sears is leaving, that would leave you without a quorum. And I don't want to do that. But, not sure how to manage both.
How long are you gonna be gone?
10 minutes.
10 minutes? Well, we may just have to go offline and come back, but as long as Janet's here, why don't we start with, your, Sergeant at Arms, budget request, and then we can kind of move back and forth. Like, I want Senator Sears to be able to get.
And I believe the chief is we have him in the room too.
Right, thank you. So, yes, it's good that Senator Sears here, because we did have a bit of a conversation about this. So Janet Miller, Sergeant at Arms, and we did send out the PowerPoint to you. And I'll kind of skip over so I don't take too much of your time.
You do, it's in your pile, it's all put together in a second. Right from you, sorry, right, in that pile.
It's under the grade.
There you go.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first page just really talks about the history. You can read that on your own time.
Yeah, we've got mostly a lot of old timers here. So
Yes.
Thank you. You remember back in the days of Ray.
Yes, you do. Or one in Roxy, or one and only police officer. So I want you to be aware, thank you for taking the time to read this, but we have unbudgeted Capitol Police transition costs, and the reason this happened is we weren't sure, we didn't know these were actually gonna happen, and all of a sudden somebody decides they want to retire. So that was our first officer that will be retiring in August of this coming year, of this year. And then the second officer we have happens to be leaving, and we think he will be probably leaving in January, so it's his decision. And then thirdly, we'll have another retirement that's going to also affect this time frame. So what we're proposing is that we can overlap with training for our existing officers and be able to have them come in here to the State House and learn the processes that we use here, or perhaps giving a person an additional training if we hire them. That would take time to get everybody up to speed. So for our first officer, it's a $40,000 one-time request. The second officer, $60,000, and the third, $60,000. And the reason this is different amounts is we probably should have hired someone already for the person that's leaving in August.
Are you recruiting now?
We're right on the cusp of the advertisement. We're trying to figure it out exactly what we're offering for the position.
Why do we have, because then we will have extra firearms, radio, and others, because.
Yes, so, and on the next page, so it kind of describes what we need to outfit an officer.
Those officers, they're leaving, they're old enough and they aren't employed long enough to retire.
Yes, they may not hold it, but they are. Yes. They're not.
So when we get done, we're actually gonna have 3 extra sets of firearms, body armor, and radio.
Well, it's not necessarily extra, it doesn't work that way, Madam Chair. It's a one-time uniform is an annual thing that, you need.
Yeah, no, I
to
understand that. I was thinking about the firearms radio.
The firearms, the we do try to update them within our budget. They do become, I wouldn't say obsolete, but they're better firearms or, updated firearms that we would continue to upgrade. And that's the same for the radios. The radios themselves, 4 of our radios are at the end of their life. So if we bring one in a year, but if we're having more officers, we'd like to just continue with outfitting them with the proper radio.
But we wouldn't be buying a new radio for the new person that's in training and a new radio for the person who is gonna be leaving. within a couple months.
No, just
I
be
think it's what we're
so new, yes. So, right, and those
So
costs,
in addition to replacing the staff, you're replacing, in essence.
and some of the equipment, the body armor and such, that's actually fitted to a person, so that's an individual item. So one might not fit another person, it's made to
I
fit.
can believe that.
Yeah.
And so what you bought it 1 year, 5 years later, that won't
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, it's a little tight.
Yeah.
Don't tell anybody that. So we just rounded that to 15,000 because these were costs, we're not, it may have gone up a little bit. And so that's that page.
You know, I have to say, Senator Sears and I were talking this morning. I think recent events have really shaken us a bit. When you think about what happened at the Capitol, as tragic as it is, one would have thought that would have been, from a law enforcement perspective, just a wonderful assignment, and it turned out to be just a horrific experience.
Yes.
And so I think it's kind of shaken up our world in terms of what can happen and the need to have trained staff and law enforcement and be prepared, and hope we never, ever, ever have to use those skills.
I appreciate that, Senator. And,
That's what
there
we're talking about back when we had Ray and Roxy, the world was Ray and Roxy.
Well, it'd be like us having a problem and you calling back up and they don't show up. I mean, that's-
And no fault to their own because they got their hands full and they have limited resources, as
So,
we've heard for all police officers.
so now it's the vehicle, probably.
Yes, that's the next piece that we just would like to talk about, and we're just proposing a 1-year pilot project in order to evaluate how well the vehicle will support the mission of the Capitol Police. And just so that all of you know that there are legitimate reasons why it's become expedited for us. And one is that we were notified that we can no longer rely on other agencies for prisoner transport, if in fact we do have that. So because of the limited resources of sheriffs and the limited resources of Montpelier Police and all, but there's also, with that comes a liability that other agencies aren't willing to take on. And it's taking their officers off their street. And it could be 3 or 4 hours that they don't have that officer here. So those are 2 reasons why
It's
we
also
don't.
very difficult to hold somebody here. I mean, you have, at a police station, you have places to hold people. I don't know where you hold anybody here that isn't part of the, maybe in the office, but that's
Yes, and that's,
small and it's difficult.
yes. And and also for training new officers, right now we have the ability to train a new officer with a field training officer that we have that works here now. But in order to do field training officer, you have to have a car to train someone, because even though we're in the Capitol and we're not writing tickets, but the Capitol Police, they are authorized to do all of this all over the state. So they have to be certified as a regular police officer that can do work anywhere in the state, which would include, practice out on the roads in a car, giving tickets and, and all the other stuff.
So they can moonlight?
Well, I wouldn't say necessarily to moonlight.
Well, why would they be out doing traffic?
Well, they wouldn't be, but to be certified as a
They should
level
learn
3
how to do
police
it.
officer, you have to have the ability to do that.
To get certified. So it's the certification as opposed to the job duties, normal job duties that are.
And of course, as you mentioned, we are seeing an increase in Off-site travel for investigations, if you've read the news lately. And I'm sure you have, for even our own members. And then we have our regular trainings that we do for officers, and they have been using their own vehicle, would be getting mileage, but it would be nice to have a vehicle here to do it. And of course, we have additional calls to the State House when we're home,
This is a 1-year pilot.
it is 1 year pilot, and then we will show statistics of the benefit and how we used it.
A vehicle from the state police.
Yes, that would be our intention. Right now, they are still contracting, vehicles are still a little bit hard to get, so we wanna see what they can offer us, and that's why we put a range in there of 12 to
The
15.
biggest problem will be where to park it.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's been a bit of a challenge. I hear these parking lots that we're still working through for our parking. So,
I'm gonna leave, but I'm okay with approving the budget they propose. I think they have good reason to, they being the sergeant at arms and the chief have good reason to move forward with the security.
So what is the overall request?
205 for that, that's the overlap, and then the additional 15,000 for the car.
Hope everything is fine.
Well-
I hope that's-
I hope so.
yeah, you haven't heard anything.
I haven't heard anything, and that's always good news.
I was gonna say, no news is good.
Yeah,
So.
when the
I'm
phone
hoping
starts
that
ringing.
arrangements worked.
Well, that's what I'm hoping, that it works, that I can come up here Tuesdays, stay home Wednesdays.
That's a lot of
Oh,
travel.
exactly. We're gonna travel.
Would you like to go offline?
Gas
so we
is
have
so
a
cheap
forum?
now.
Yeah, gas is so cheap, right?
Okay.
You're gonna